Ireland, emigration out of Poland, what does the allocation of labor between Ireland and Poland look like? That is, before any sort of labor migration. I'm sorry? Okay, so what does that mean? Where's the middle? Does that mean there? Okay, we know that the marginal product of labor in Ireland was higher. So let's just pick a point like here. May or may not be the right point. Let's just pick this one. So this is the labor force in Ireland and the labor force in Poland. This suggests that Poland has a very large labor force. Ireland does not. And notice what it tells us. We have a very high real wage in Ireland and a very low real wage or marginal product in Poland. Okay. Now, here's a question to think about. Will a country with a high marginal product of labor always have a relatively small population compared to a country that has a relatively low marginal product of labor? No? Can you give me an example? China versus India? Right, but isn't that what we're showing here? Poland has a very large population and a very low marginal product of labor. But again, isn't that what we're showing here with Ireland? What I want to know is, can you think of an opposite example? Can you think of a very large country with a very high marginal product of labor and a country with a very small labor force population with a very low marginal product of labor? Okay, name one. Okay, Ethiopia has a smaller population. So the United States has a population about 300 million and a labor force of about 145 million. Fairly large, right? U.S. is what, the third or fourth largest population in the world? Mexico has a population that's 1/3 the size of the United States. Right? So the point here is the size of the population doesn't have anything to do, that is, where the allocation is here, doesn't have anything to do with where the marginal products are. In other words, countries with small populations can have very high marginal products of labor. They can also have very low marginal products of labor. And very small countries can have high or low. So the size of the country doesn't matter, although it does matter how you draw the diagram. Right? So if we wanted Ireland to have a very large population, but a very high marginal product, this entire curve would have to be much, much higher, so that the intersection point would be over here. Then we could say that Ireland has a large population as opposed to Poland, but still higher marginal product of labor.
Why did this happen with the owners of capital? At least in capital in terms of, is this to be doing that? With those prices for too, when people that own capital when you to make higher MPA compared to capital?
Yes. So this is all short term. This is all short term. So yes, in the long run. So if we look at this slide, right? So what would you expect to happen here in the longer run? Or what else? Right. So if the return to any factor of production starts to go up, generally the supply of that factor of production will then increase in the intermediate to longer term. It may not be able to increase much in the short term, but in the longer term, presumably this will be pushed out. And then the return to capital will come back down again. And the same thing over here. You clear more land to bring down the return to land. So yes, in the longer run, you get a different effect. Okay, so notice that this is our initial allocation of labor right here. Right? Ireland, Poland, different marginal productivities of labor. Now we open it up to Polish emigration. Ireland immigration into Ireland, immigration out of Poland. And let's assume that we get complete convergence of real wages. Right? Probably take a really long period of time for that to happen, but let's just assume that we're actually going to get to this particular point. Let's call this point A. Right? So notice that at point A, the real wage in Ireland has come down, and the real wage in Poland has come up. And we now have a different allocation of labor, a lot more workers in Ireland and a lot fewer workers in Poland. So what has happened to world output? Now remember what we've seen. The workers leaving Poland reduce Polish output, right? The production possibilities curve shifts in. The workers coming to Ireland help push Ireland's production possibilities curve out. So in Poland, output is shrinking. In Ireland, output is increasing. So what's the net effect? Increase, decrease, ambiguous, or zero? More likely to be increasing. Okay, so the decline in Polish output should be smaller than the increase in Irish output. Why would we expect that?
It looks like before we were pointing at
Okay. Right. So the key here is that the marginal product of labor is different between the two countries. So let's see if we can figure out how much output does Poland lose by having these workers, right? So when a worker leaves, Polish output will fall by that worker's marginal product of labor. The next worker actually has a higher marginal product of labor, right? The labor force has declined, so the marginal product of labor is now increased. So in Poland, the loss of output is given by that area. Let's call this QP negative. Now we have to ask ourselves, this worker's not just leaving Poland and sitting on the beach in the south of France doing nothing. He's actually moved to Ireland where it's really cold, so he needs to get a job in order to stay warm during the winter. So he goes to Ireland, where notice that worker, when he leaves here and Irish output goes down, whoa, Ireland's now been able to produce a lot more. This worker is a lot more productive in Ireland than he was in Poland. So it's all white chalk. So Irish output goes up by that amount. The area underneath the Irish marginal product of labor curve. So Polish output goes down by the area underneath its marginal product of labor curve. Irish output goes up by the area underneath its marginal product curve. And what you can see then is that this triangle area would be the net increase in world economic output. The net increase in world economic output. What's the net? The net is this, it's not really a triangle, but this triangular shaped area. So it's the area underneath the Irish marginal product of labor curve, but above the Polish marginal product of labor curve. No, Ireland is all of the area under its marginal product curve. Poland's the area under its. So if you take this big area, subtract this area, you're left with this triangle. So that's the net increase there. So it turns out then that world economic output actually goes up because a worker is more productive in Ireland than they were in Poland. Why might a worker in Ireland be more productive than a worker in Poland? Why might the marginal product of labor in Ireland be higher than in Poland? There are two primary reasons that we know. One is that the workforce in Ireland has more capital to work with. So there's a larger capital stock in every industry in Ireland than there is in Poland. When workers have more capital to work with, they also have a higher marginal product of labor. The second reason, which may actually even be more important, is productivity or technology levels. Remember the A term in our production functions? Productivity or technology is also higher in countries that have large capital stocks and where the marginal product of labor is higher. So it becomes self-reinforcing. So it's interesting, when a worker who hasn't changed in terms of their personal skill set moves from a very low income, low wage rate country because they have a low marginal product of labor and migrates to a high income, high marginal product of labor country, their wage immediately goes up. None of their personal characteristics did, but their real wage goes up because the marginal product of labor is so much higher. So again, we end up with a situation where a more efficient allocation of labor on a global scale would end up raising world economic output. Notice, we can attain this same outcome, that is expanded world output of goods and services, not necessarily by moving workers, but actually by engaging in international trade. Having Poland produce those goods and export those goods and services in which it has comparative advantage, and Ireland produce those goods and services in which it has a comparative advantage. So in that context, we can also get these gains without the labor migration. Now, a question arose earlier, would this change relative prices? And of course the answer is yes, it would. But if we now start changing relative prices, which we could do, we could talk about in Ireland we have economic growth, which increases what we saw over here, was the output of both goods and services. We lose both goods and services. One of the reasons we left labor neutral is because there would be no particular bias towards that growth, in which case the relative prices probably wouldn't change. Okay, so if one of the industries was labor intensive, for instance, then more of the labor would go into that. You would have an increased output of that good if the labor was going to the country that was, excuse me, if labor was moving into the country that had the higher marginal product of labor, and it was also at a comparative advantage in labor intensive goods, then you would have a biased expansion and the external relative price of that good would fall. Now we've got to go back and change prices, which shifts these curves again, right? And it will shift all of them in both countries, which gets really messy. Okay, is there anything else that we need to say? Okay, so actually I think that's it. So on Thursday, we'll talk a little bit about next week's exam. I guess I'll have to think about it between now and then. And we'll do a little bit of review, and then if you have no questions, we'll leave early.